There's a new murder capital of the United States. New Orleans now leads the nation in murders per capita. There have been more than 200 homicides so far this year in the Big Easy.
Yes, murder capital of the United States, right here, New Orleans.
Many cities in the United States have seen a dramatic rise in their homicide rate since 2020. Some people feel it is a result of the pandemic and ensuing lockdown, while others believe movements to reform the police have led to a collapse in morale and a reduction in officer numbers. Here in New Orleans, the homicide rate is the highest in the country. But how did it get this way, and what can be done to fix it? Ishwanda Riles left her 18-year-old daughter at home with the girl's boyfriend on May the 7th, not knowing it would be the last time she would see her alive. Her daughter died of a gunshot wound later that day.
It's never nothing like mother and daughter. You know what I'm saying? When it happened, I see other little girls remind me so much of how slim she was. And I just walk over because I'm like, my daughter supposed to be here with me. She's supposed to be that's all I wanted was a daughter. And now that's gone, you know, that's something I always wanted. I had two boys my last when I'm like, I wanted a girl. And I got that girl and now someone took her away. It's hard. You know, it's just, I wish I could have did more on it. But I know she don't want me to cry. She don't want me to be upset. She just want me to live.
Where did the homicide happen?
It happened here. Like I said, they didn't let me see, but when I came, like I said, it felt like, and I just how things was, I feel like she was on this side. They didn't never tell me where at, but when you know your house, you know what things. So I feel she was on this side of the bed, and he was supposed to be on that side of the bed.
So what is his story of what happened?
I never spoke with him. The detective told me that he said he was playing with the gun and the gun went off. And when he looked, then he noticed she was hit. Then he dropped the gun on the bed and that didn't, the dad told me, he said he was throwing the gun in the air. That don't sound, it's just so many conflicts of the story. It's just, so I was trying to figure out and ask them how did they come up with what they came up with.
So they said that your daughter's boyfriend had a gun and it went off.
Yeah, that's what he claimed, yes. Right. Yeah, I feel if it was an accident, why did you leave her? You know, I know you could have been in shock, but you could have went and got help. Because I feel like if I accidentally did something, I don't care how much scared I am, I'm going to get help. I'm going to go get help. I'm not going to, if I say I love you and I would never harm you and it was an accident, if you loved her, you would never love her the way you left her. So that let me know you didn't have no kind of concern. You didn't care.
My daddy don't do nothing wrong. But help people. My daddy help people too. Then it will come in and say, how y'all get a nigga to help everybody?
We're in the 3000 block of Toledano Street, which is in the Broadmoor area of the city.
Okay, and can you tell me what's happened here?
We had a call earlier tonight, a report of shots fired. Our officers responded to the scene and located a adult male who was found to have sustained a gunshot wound and was declared deceased on scene by emergency medical technicians. The incident is being investigated as a homicide. Unfortunately, this is one more, way too many we've had. We have a great homicide unit, a very overworked homicide unit. We're in the 6th district of the city right now. This area's in the 6th district.
And have you had a lot of homicides in this area this year?
We've had a few. Now I can't say for a lot for sure. We've had a few. It's basically been happening all over the city. There's no real area of the city is not had something. So that's the sad part. It's not really kept in one specific area. We've had things all over the city. So we just try to respond as best we can and investigate these and get them solved and build a strong case for our district attorney to bring to court. Once we get somebody arrested and charged. If we have enough evidence to have them prosecuted, that's what we do. So, but let me say, it's a lot of work for a very overworked and overstressed department, and the manpower issues have been,
Yeah, they're well documented.
Yes, that's what it is. We have to work with what we have. I think we're doing a greater job as we could do with the situation we're in right now. So.
Yeah, it's got to be tough though when they're coming as thick and fast as they are, right?
It can be, yeah, it can be. But I say we have a very good group of people in this department that I think very smart, very knowledgeable of the city, and are doing their best to solve these cases as fast as we can.
Yeah.
Just 36 hours later, there was a second homicide. This one in the Algiers area of the city, on the south side of the Mississippi River.
How are you doing tonight?
Not bad, man. How are you?
That's to be expected for what's going on. We're here. So.
What's happening?
We had a homicide happened about, my initial call was about 6 o'clock tonight. Male victim was found in a little grassy area, a little bit out the way from here toward the intersection. He had multiple gunshot wounds, and he was transported to the hospital via EMS, and he was declared deceased at the hospital. So it became a homicide at that point. So yeah. So we're out here and we're investigating the scene. We actually just had one of our canine units arrive to bring one of the dogs out to search for any ballistics evidence, bullet casings, actual bullets, anything we can find that can help the case.
So we had one on Friday.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't have one on Saturday.
None on Saturday, and then one today. Yes, only one today so far. So yeah, yesterday we actually didn't have any yesterday, which was great. So.
Is that unusual for a Saturday night at the moment?
I wouldn't necessarily say it's unusual. We some days we may go a few days without having one, and some days we may have a lot. It just kind of depends. So with the numbers being the way they are, any day we don't have one is a good day.
In a city awash with violent deaths, there are some crimes that retain the power to shock. Those who witnessed the deadly carjacking of 73-year-old Linda Fricky are still haunted by what they saw.
Carjackings have been on the rise in cities across America, but this is one of the most shocking. Police say a 73-year-old grandmother was attacked in her car by 4 teens and ended up being dragged to her death.
It was March 21st, and I was making an iced coffee here, so I was just grabbing a glass and filling it with some ice and reaching for the cold brew, and then I just heard this loud noise, and it sounded like all I knew it was coming from somewhere on this corner. I heard voices. I heard something. It was like a scream, but it didn't sound like a scream. It was just loud, and so I'm running. I start running across the room here, and I'm going out the front door. And I'm stopping here for a second, and I start looking because this is where the noise is to my right. And I see this car, and I see this, it's a body. I was like, this isn't real. And then it starts like getting closer to me. And so I run down these stairs, and I'm running all the way to the end. And when I reached here, I'm just looking at this car that's steadily going in front of me, and I'm screaming no, and I'm running, and I stop here. It's coming, so it slows down. The car slows down, and I could still hear up to this point. I now realize it was a woman, and she's saying, "Please let me go." And it looked like she was clutching a purse. I swear, it was like she had her arm so close to her side, and she was just bouncing up and down against the cement, and then you can hear that dragging with her skin. And I literally, from there to here, I can see like her clothes are peeling off of her, and I'm just like, I want to catch the car because it's slowing down in front of me. And Mark put Lotus in the house, and we're running, and we just continue to run after the car. And I'm looking because from this angle, you can see that it's making the curve, it's making this corner to go into the Rouse's, through the Rouse's parking lot, Rouse's being the supermarket that's here. And when we got to the top here, So we cross all the way over onto this sidewalk, and Miss Linda, which now I know her name, her head is sort of enmeshed in these metal lines here. There are steel, and the lines, obviously, when they tried to cut through, it finally cut her loose because it severed her arm. And I just remember when I reached this point, she was just laying face up, and her arm was next to her, and her other arm, I remember looking over, and there's an arm over there. It's like 2 feet from her, 3 feet maybe. And I just remember thinking, where is the blood? I just felt like I was having an out-of-body experience, and just looking down at her, and I'm thinking, she's naked, I have to cover her up. I remember thinking, I was seeing her as I would my mom, or it was just so undignified for her to be just laying here in the middle of the sidewalk naked after everything she had just been through. So I ran back home, and I got a sheet, and I came across here, and then there's even more people starting to gather, and they let me cover her up. She was supposed to be retired, and she was just finishing up a couple more days because she was helping somebody out, I believe. And so she shouldn't have really even been here.
New Orleans has long been known as a violent city with a high number of homicides, so I wanted to find out more about the cultural reasons behind its reputation. I drove an hour or so to the state capital, Baton Rouge, to meet with Dr. Edward Shahadi. He has spent years studying the sociological drivers of homicide in high crime areas.
New Orleans has always been in the top 5, top 10 murder cities in America. And it's got a very high homicide rate, and always has for as long as I can remember. I think as long as we've measured these numbers. And it's traced back to the fact that in Louisiana, I mean, here we are in Louisiana, this is very high poverty, very low, lower education. And then on top of all of that, on top of those socioeconomic pressures that we know increase homicide, there's the culture. And in the South, there's something called the Southern subculture of violence. And that is a subculture within America. It's not all over America. It's mainly in the South, where there's slightly more social approval to deal with things in a violent manner, especially if things are taken more personally, as an affront. You said something to me, now I need to get back at you. I can't let that go because I would look weak. And so you add all those things together, the poverty, lower rates of education, the lack of services, high rates of incarceration, all of that, plus the Southern subculture of violence, and you end up with cities like New Orleans that have very high homicide rates. And it's no coincidence that Louisiana has the 3 cities that are among the most violent in America: New Orleans, Baton Rouge, and Shreveport. This homicide rise that we're seeing, not just in New Orleans, but all across the United States, is driven by the pandemic. One of the mothers of all criminological theories, which is called social disorganization theory, started back in the 1920s. And it was kind of the transformative, the big bang of criminology itself. And it says that when things change very quickly, when you get a disruption, crime goes up. Because you and I now are disrupted, we don't have interconnections anymore. You and I can't work together to lower homicide rates in the streets. It happened in Baghdad, when crime rates rose after the US invasion. It happened in New Orleans after Katrina, the Hurricane Katrina. It happened in Baton Rouge when 100,000 people were rendered homeless after a flood. Crime rates went up. And it's happening now nationwide with this pandemic. And that's what's happened. And so during a pandemic, people retreat into their homes, as you and I did. We stayed at home and we didn't engage the streets anymore. Well, that leaves the streets free now for young men, especially young men who are not attached to anything, to wander around and get into problems and to get into fights and conflicts and so on. And that's what happened.
Ron Serpas was the superintendent of the NOPD from 2010 until 2015, a period when the city was still struggling 5 years after Hurricane Katrina.
In your last year as chief here in New Orleans in 2014, there were 156 homicides in that year. And now, in 2022, even only at the end of June of this year, so 6 months of the year, there's already been 145. What's happened in the city to raise that homicide rate so high?
There's movements of people through time who are going to choose ultimate acts of violence against one another. And the police and the criminal justice system needs to be as predictive about that as they possibly can, and then focus their time and resources on those people and in the very predictable places where they're going to do these things. That's a scientifically proven method, if you will, of reducing violent crime associated with guns. Takes a lot of people, though. And what's happened here in New Orleans in the last several years is the staffing has dropped. The ability to fund those units with people and resources has been eliminated, and in fact, they've been cut out. And that type of criminal behavior pays a lot of attention to the police too. And if they see that the police aren't engaging them in that way anymore, they get a little emboldened by it. In 2013, we had indicted more than 10 groups and gangs with more than 100 defendants, many of them looking at life sentences. That's a treatment effect that went into the community of those types of people, and they said, we need to slow down a minute here, because this is getting out of control for us. And I don't make light of it, but you've got to be like that focused. And if you can't be, you start to see these escalations of conflicts with people using guns. There's a whole body of knowledge of what we don't know about why they choose to kill each other so randomly over things, but it happens. We can do better. I know we can. We've done it here in New Orleans 2 or 3 times already. We've done it in other cities. It's just, it takes resources of people. It takes resources of funding. It takes collaboration of the criminal justice partners of probation, parole, corrections, the prosecutors. It takes the citizens willing to see that this small number of people are holding them all hostage. It can work, but you just can't do it in a condition in New Orleans right now with the staffing equations that they have. It's just not going to work.
In 2011, the NOPD had 1,349 officers. By 2021, this was down to just over 1,000. It is currently around 900, with one officer leaving every 36 hours. Only 33 new officers were recruited in 2021.
One of the key issues in New Orleans, like many cities in America, is there's been a political expediency in the purposes of demonizing these young men and women. There are going to be errors in life, and there are going to be errors that are preventable that we should do everything we can do. And there's going to be errors that occur that were not preventable. And there's been a political win through New Orleans and many American cities where there's no tolerance for an error. It had to all be illicit. And that vilification of police officers is, it's damaging to anybody to go to work every day and realize that the political environment assumes that you're criminal, assumes that you're murderous, assumes that you can't be repaired. And that's going to drive morale down. And leadership is about being where sometimes you're not going to say what people want to hear, but you're going to say what you know is going to make a difference. And we've had too much of the saying what we think people want to hear versus what we know is going to make a difference.
Right after 9/11, the police were very popular. It didn't take too long for that to change again. And we're probably at one of the most lowest points we've been in nationally. However, that trend is starting to change. I think as crime has escalated in most of major American cities, people have decided that maybe supporting the police isn't such a bad idea after all. And that while there were some changes that perhaps needed to be made, we didn't have to abandon the entire process. And I think that's what's happening now is we're going to see a bit of a resurgence back into the profession. And I think people will appreciate the police a little bit more, and that will help nationally. Now, locally, that's another story. We've been losing officers to local departments all around us. It tells you that people aren't leaving policing. They're leaving policing here. And that's the problem. So why are they leaving here to go 7 miles to the north and 7 miles to the east and 7 miles to the west, but they won't stay here? We should have a dozen on any given shift. At least 8, 9, 10, if not a dozen, but we often have 2 or 3. If we have four, that's a good day for a particular district. Yeah, that would be a good day. They have 4. They should have at least twice that, maybe 3 times that, to be truly effective. So we don't have anywhere near what we should have. If something happens, it may take 10 minutes for somebody else to get there. A lot happens in 10 minutes. You know, everything is very frequently over in 10 minutes. So basically you don't have backup and you don't have support. And this is a violent environment. Like I said, we have a murder rate 12 times that of New York and the highest in the country, which means the chances of getting involved in a deadly force situation are good. And you have nobody there to back you up. If you have 3 officers working in a district and each one is on a call in a different place, you don't have any backup. You don't have any support. And that's another reason why cops are leaving, is because they don't want to work in that environment. I can't say I blame them.
In a city with so many homicides and so few police, what happens to the mountain of evidence that each killing generates? It ends up here, in an unassuming building under an overpass in the city.
And so you are open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week?
Yeah, we're open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, all year, every year. We maintain this building regardless of what happens. So when Hurricane Ida hit, it was manned 24/7, 365 days a year. Based on the nature of what we do, we always have personnel here. It's always secured. We'll go this way.
Okay, so what are we looking at here?
All right, so this is one of 2 rooms that we have where we house everything, all the evidence associated with homicides that occurred in the city of New Orleans. And some of these bags you can see, those house more than one piece of evidence a lot of times. So you can see there's envelopes and things like that. So we do have a lot of items. All of these go back to Hurricane Katrina. That's when we moved in this facility. Homicide is unique in the sense that all the evidence associated with them, it's kept indefinitely. So we store it till we don't have to store it anymore, which is a long, long, long time. This will be here long after you and I have passed. Where we're going now, this is the firearms room. It's one of 2 rooms that we have, and I'll explain to you what you see when we get inside.
Okay.
So you can see there's a bunch of different boxes in this room. We got a bunch of different shelving. So every box you see here is a handgun. These larger boxes you see up here and the larger boxes you see back here on the wall, those are all long guns. That could be a rifle, a shotgun, anything. It runs the gamut of what we have. So you can see we have a FAG. FA is for firearms, G is a location. So it's something as simple as that. Now, I say simple, you look at what we have here, and this is one of 2 rooms, so it's simple in the sense that we know where things are. Sometimes you still have to do a little looking though.
And what are the kind of most common guns that you recover?
So the majority of what we have, as you can see, we have a lot more handguns than we do long guns. But, Louisiana is a hunting state, so we do get a lot of hunting rifles and things like that. So you can see some of these go back to 2007, like I said, and possibly even 2005. If you want to make your trek back here, we can squeeze through a lot of this. Again, in these boxes, this is all ballistic evidence that we have stored, the older stuff. We keep it here. And you can get an idea of the sheer enormity of what we deal with.
Wow, so this is incredible.
Yeah. So you can see we have a lot of long guns in here. We have a lot of handguns in here.
And these are all guns that have been recovered in the city of New Orleans?
These are all guns that were recovered in the city of New Orleans, yes.
Yeah. Oh, is this a semi-automatic rifle?
Yes, that's an AK-47. You can see the stock has been sawed off on it.
Oh, yeah.
We get a lot of different stuff. We really, truly do.
What about this?
That is, it looks like an AR-15, an extremely old AR-15. It's completely rusted shut. And you see the same thing with a lot of the older handguns. They're all completely rusted. And that did not happen here. That was brought in that way. Mm-hmm. So.
Would you take a guess at how many guns we're looking at here?
Probably about 10,000 just right here. I mean, you can see we got them piled upon each other. And at some point, these will be destroyed. Get you all the way to the back so you can see the scope of it all. So one of the main things that the police department houses here is DNA, right? So there's 2 types that we have. We have sexual assault kits that have to be kept cold. They're kept inside of these refrigerators. And then we have DNA swabs that are taken. It could be something as simple as swabbing the steering wheel of a stolen car that was used in a robbery or a homicide. So you can see how much of it we do have. And we have one officer that's responsible for all of it.
So are these all samples that have been processed?
No, the majority of these have not been processed yet.
Okay. And how far back do these go?
I can't speak, so some of these go back as early as 2010, and even further back to Katrina in 2005. With that being said, the sexual assault kits are tested through LSP, Louisiana State Police Crime Lab. We're on a schedule to get those tested, so I can't give a definitive answer of how many we don't have tested.
In August of 2022, the NOPD admitted it has over 70,000 DNA samples stored here that have yet to be tested. It is not just in the testing of DNA samples that there are problems. In 2020, a civilian working at the police crime lab began voicing concerns about how evidence was being processed. He complained that the lab was using outdated reference samples for drugs and not testing samples of marijuana properly. When these issues were ignored, his health began to suffer, and so he told the NOPD he needed some time off to get some help.
I informed my sergeant that I was not going to work. I told him that I wanted to take time off. I didn't really care if I got paid for it. I just said unpaid time off. And I didn't even know how long. I told him probably a week or two. And he kept trying to get me to come to the crime lab to have a meeting with the police. I didn't want to do that. And, you know, if they wanted to try to fire me, I guess they could have tried to fire me, but what they did to me was not right. Next thing I know is I hear keys jingling. I go to open the door, and they're about to make the apartment assistant manager open the door.
I actually don't want to talk right now, sir.
All right, well, you need to talk to me. All right, you have to at this point.
719.
You have to. All right, is there a problem?
Problem with what?
You need to talk to me.
There's a problem with what?
If you talk to me.
There's a problem with the working conditions of the lab.
Okay, well.
And next thing I know, the guy sticks his foot in the door, and then he says, and we're coming in. This is a wellness check. And then I said, and you're coming in, huh? Like, these are all armed cops. I'm in my underwear. You know, like, I feel like if I would have slammed the door on him or something, that they would have tried to, like, bust through and like, do something to me. So he walks through, the other cop follows him.
You have any weapons?
I'm talking to my coworker who's a supervisor and used to be a cop as well. And I'm like, they just let themselves in my apartment. And he's like, they can't do that, it's against the law. I was scared because I knew my rights were being violated. The guy on the phone's telling me my rights are being violated, so.
But it's not easy when you're in that situation. You've got 3 people in uniform telling you.
And my kid's half naked, standing right there. And he's had a lot of issues since that. Like for months, he would hide under my desk when I heard the door knock and stuff. Knock on the door, or hide under the table, or just run in the hallway. It was frightening for all of us.
PIB is the Public Integrity Bureau, which is the NOPD's version of internal affairs. It is tasked with ensuring officers are following the rules.
And so then when you came outside on the body cam, we see the lieutenant saying that you've got to go to PIB. And what were you thinking when she said that? Because obviously their first explanation for being here was that it was wellness check. Right. And now suddenly it's become, you've got to come with us to PIB.
Right. I definitely believe that PIB and the officers here use that as a precursor to take me to PIB. The wellness check was just a farce. I think they were all in it together. I don't think it was just the individual officers.
They need to speak with you about different things that's been going on. You're concerned about your well-being. Yeah, you can talk to them at PIB and you can express whatever you're dealing with as far as the crime lab or whatever. But at this point, we're just concerned about your well-being.
So I'm not under arrest for that.
You are not under arrest at all.
So not.
320. Call PIB. I just got off the phone with them. PIB said that you need to come to their office.
Okay. But I'm not under arrest, so I can go back to my house.
You're not going to jail.
If I can go back to my house.
You call them back.
And then she calls PIB again, and the first thing you hear from the guy is clock him in, and he's been ordered to be put on the clock him in and bring him. He's going to take the drug test.
Okay, all right. Bye-bye.
So a test?
So Carl.
Being ordered in.
You've been ordered by PIB. You're now on the clock. You're being paid. You're being ordered to come and take a drug test and a urinalysis, blood and alcohol reality test at PIB.
You can't clock someone against their will. You know, it's called forced labor. It's also against the law. You know, so like they just broke so many laws. You know, they as in everyone, not just the officers here.
They took you out to the car, and when you get to the car, they decided they're going to search you?
They patted me down, frisked me, whatever you want to call it, and they told me that they had to do it to put me in the back of the police car, and it made me feel like I was a criminal, basically.
How you doing today, sir? Good afternoon.
I knew it was my rights I could refuse the test, and they wouldn't let me go. He said, you can't leave until you take the test. And not until I said, well, you're not letting me leave. You're telling me I'm a city employee. You already took me against my will. This doesn't seem right. So, you know, I guess the only way you're gonna let me go is if I resign. And after I said that, he's like, you're resigning? I said, well, if you're not gonna let me leave, then I resign. And he said, okay, put he resigned on the paperwork. And then they took me to the interview room. This wasn't on the body camera, but this is what happened. I had the sneaking suspicion and that they were trying to set me up for something, that they were trying to, that they were gonna doctor the test. You know, it was either force them to resign or doctor the test. That's my suspicion at that point. And I could not trust any of these officers. The officers in the interview room, you know, the sergeant from PIB, he brings a resignation letter back to me and he goes, did anyone force you to sign this resignation letter? Of course, nobody forced me to sign it. I signed it, but I was forced to go there. So it would have never happened if I would not have gone there, you know. I just don't understand how that happened and how all those people haven't been, I don't know, nothing's really happened to them. I think most of them, nothing ever happened to them.
Carl filed a federal complaint over what happened to him, and it is still to be decided in court. But it is not just in the crime lab where it appears the NOPD is not addressing serious issues. A local professor has been investigating timesheet fraud within the department, an issue he says is widespread and has been going on for years.
Nice to meet you.
Yeah, nice to meet in person.
Yeah.
Now, standard week is 43 hours. It's 43 hours, give or take a few minutes. And most officers, that's what they work. All right, so when you look at the average officer, they work a 43-hour week, which is a full work week and a demanding job, right? You're going into high-stress situations.
And so what is it that you're seeing in terms of officers working more than that 43 hours a week?
I've seen officers that are recording 100, 110, 120 hours in a week.
But aren't there rules against that?
So there are, but it's clear from when I started looking at it, they were unenforced.
Well, perhaps we could have a look at some of the specific examples in this.
Sure. This is one of the officers that I was talking about, just this improbably long hours. So when you start to look at days, what you see is there was 2 different payroll systems, and you have to take both of them and look at them to figure out how many total days. So just in NOPD time, he worked 21 hours. The problem is during that same day, he also worked a detail. And what you see in the red here is where he's claiming to work both at the NOPD and at a detail. And you can see just lots of red. Now, that's one of the ways to get to
more than 24 hours in a day.
Right. And this officer, this was frequent. So you can imagine how a mistake could occur. And occasional mistakes could occur. I have no doubt about it. There's 2 different systems, they don't communicate. And there's a human involved. The problem is that the average officer is working a 40-hour plus week, 43 hours. This just doesn't happen. And when I look at their records, it just never happens. Here's another example, a 15-hour day, a 17-hour day, a 19-hour day, a 22-hour day, and a 20-hour day. This is the same officer. Mm-hmm. During this 5-day period, managed to work 110 hours in a 5-day period. And the longest break in that 110 hours was a 4-hour break.
If we look at his pay breakdown, it's got, say for example, 2021, last year, his base pay of $73,000. His NOPD pay actually came out at $147,000. So he's doubled his pay in overtime, I'm assuming, yeah? And then his detail pay is an extra $36,000.
That's right.
So that brings him out at $183,000 for the year on a base pay of $73,000.
Yep.
So just as a comparison, what rank within the NOPD would be getting $200,000 a year as a base pay?
No one.
Okay.
No one. Even the chief of police doesn't get that. The chief of police, if I remember correctly, is in the 170 range.
Okay.
And he is the chief of police. So these salaries right here exceed the chief of police and the mayor's pay.
And is anyone ever forced to give the money back?
I have yet to see an example. Man, that's a good question. I've yet to see an example where that's happened, where they have received a suspension for a day or 2 or 3. I've yet to see. Now, it may have happened because I don't have all the records, but I've yet to see an example where that's happened.
If this continues to be ignored, can the NOPD ever recover control of the city?
Most officers in the NOPD are honest. Most are trying to do the right thing. And unfortunately, there is this group that is benefiting at the expense of you, I, and other officers. And it's discouraging. And if we keep hemorrhaging good officers, what it leaves behind are the ones that we don't want, the ones that aren't there for the right reason. They're not there to help people. They're there to help themselves. And that has to stop.
At a press conference in City Hall, the mayor announced a new plan for addressing the city's policing problems. She had recently brought in 2 former senior NYPD officers, John Linder and Fausto Pichardo, to help her conduct an assessment of where the biggest problems are in the police department.
Listening to the men and women of the New Orleans Police Department quickly gave us some immediate next steps, things that we can present to make some changes. We know that everyone across the entire country is experiencing staffing shortages relative to policing, so it's not immune to the city of New Orleans. But this requires us to do things differently and create force multipliers within our city, but more importantly, make sure that every officer that is commissioned in our city is available to patrol. And so what we will be doing, starting immediately, we have non-patrol special operations and investigative duties will immediately be reassigned to patrol duties in uniform across the city of New Orleans to ensure that we give our officers the level of support that they need and the level of support that they've indicated that they definitely not only need, but they desire.
At the press conference, we were given a handout that detailed a new payment offer of $30,000 for all new recruits and existing officers. Also in the handout was an outline of how some NOPD duties could be contracted out to civilian providers. New Orleans has a long history of using private security companies to provide additional police services. It is home to the largest number of private security districts in the country. These are residential areas where everyone pays a supplemental tax and receives additional services including neighbourhood security patrols. The people who live in these neighbourhoods feel crime in the city is out of control and that the NOPD cannot respond quickly enough when needed.
I mean, our police force, I'm saddened because of the lack of police that we have. I'm saddened for the lack of security, you know, because I should be able to call 911 and the police come out, you know, within a normal time frame, but that doesn't happen. My city frightens me, and I hate to say that. You know, I've lived other places, but it frightens me, you know, the carjackings, you know, people pumping gas and they're being carjacked, you know. When I pull into my driveway, before I pull into my driveway, I have to be observant to make sure, nobody's following me. If you're out at night and say you're coming home 10 or 11 o'clock, you can call the car and tell them you want an escort. And you tell them where you are and how long it's going to be before you get, to your house. And when you get there, they're sitting there in front of your door. I love that.
Marcia's security district is run by former NOPD officer Reginald Rowe. He tours her quiet suburban neighbourhood wearing a bulletproof vest and carrying a semi-automatic gun.
So we're going to go, and of course we have to be prepared. You guys are in my custody, so I have to make sure you guys are taken care of. Okay. So I don't want to go out there empty-handed and say, hey, everybody run for cover. Can't run for cover. Got to be prepared.
Sure. So just tell me what this is.
So this is a 9mm, and this is a weapon that I carry instead of a sidearm. In New Orleans, I would say we have more AR-15s on the street than normal, right? And so if we don't have the weapons to be able to match their weapons, it's a losing battle. And so, unfortunately, we have to carry weapons that will be able to protect the actual neighborhoods that we're providing the service for. We go out there with sidearms that don't hold up, then what's the purpose of having us?
And so what sort of advantage does that give you over a handgun?
Well, this advantage gives me, I can put a sight on it, I have a light on it, all the things I need to do and I train with this weapon. So it's not a weapon that I just say I'm gonna pop out with and just carry. You have to train. This is my tool. Just like you guys have a camera doing this interview right now, this is my camera. And you can't get the work done if you don't have a camera to tell your story. So this is how I have to protect the very people that we're providing the service for. It's not illegal for me to ask you, hey, how are you doing today, sir? Mm-hmm. What's your name? Alastair?
Yeah, Alastair.
Name's Alastair. Okay. You live around here?
No, I don't.
You don't? Oh, wow, okay. You're interested in purchasing a home in this area?
I just thought it looked like a nice neighborhood to have a walk in.
Can I walk with you tonight?
Actually, I'd like to be alone with my thoughts.
Well, while you do that, I'll make sure that you're okay while you're doing that, okay? See the difference? Now, how did that make you feel?
Uncomfortable.
Made you feel uncomfortable? Or did it make you feel like, if I'm doing something wrong, I maybe need to get out of this area?
Hello.
Hey, how you doing,
How you
Miss
doing?
Marcia?
Yeah.
I don't even have one of those.
So we put them in a vest because, you gift wrap them to me and I want to make sure they make it back to where they're going. So one of the things we do when we check in the vehicles, we make sure there's no glass on the ground. That's a signification that the car window has been broken.
Yep.
All right? And so we come out with our flashlights, making sure that all the vehicles are safe. We check down the alleyways. As you see, no lights are on here, right? So this car is probably more prone to be broken into.
Okay.
Because it's not in a well-lit area, right? So we check in, making sure everything is okay. And so we walk down the block and make sure that these cars are checked, and then we get in the car and do a patrol.
Okay.
Right? And the reason we do both is because we want to make sure that we can catch everything. Most criminals, they hide in the alleyways, right? And so having the capability of walking, they're never expecting us to do that, not at night. They're thinking, okay, they're gonna pass me in the car with the lights on and now I'm gonna finish doing finish my crime. And so the walking kind of surprises them.
Isn't there a danger that you end up with two tiers of policing in the city, with those who can afford your services and those who can't?
I think it's a safeguard. I know I definitely would want it in my community. I would want somebody I can call 24 hours or at the ready and say, hey, I heard a strange noise in my backyard, compared to waiting for the police to come, and it may take them some time to get there. We have one of our residents pulling out their garbage. The reason they're with their children. That makes us feel good because they're not afraid to do that at night, right? But have you seen a police officer out here since we've been walking?
No.
And it's not that they're not being proactive, it's that they're handling serious calls, right? So you told me you made some homicide scenes. Homicides are up here in New Orleans, carjackings are up here in New Orleans. So having that second tier of safety is most important for the residents in New Orleans. Who can afford it?
One of the things that the NOPD is looking at the moment is the idea of offloading some of their work to private sector companies because they don't have enough officers and they're struggling to recruit enough officers.
And that's why you have little brothers.
So could you see a time when civil security provided more than neighbourhood security and we're actually providing some services citywide that the police currently provide?
I believe that day will come. I believe that day will come. And the reason I believe that day will come because of the level of confidence that the people inside of the communities have for us. So could you imagine if we started providing these same services where they work or where they hang out? It's a possibility that can happen. And so our goal is not to take over. Our goal is simply to assist and give them a break, right? Let us handle the low profile calls, and they can focus on the greater things. Yeah.
The obvious advantage to civilianizing some of our services is that it would free up officers to address the more pressing issues of violent crime. And on its face, that sounds like a very good thing. But there are some problems with that. Part of the problems with that is whether or not, first, you're going to get the same level of service from a civilianized agency than you would from a commissioned officer. In some cases, while civilians can respond to the problem has to be solved by a commissioned officer. If it requires an arrest or requires a summons or requires a report, civilians may not be able to handle that. But more importantly, in this particular department, New Orleans is an event-driven economy. That is, we have a continuous number of social events that drive our economy. There's Mardi Gras, there's Jazz Fest. There are all kinds of events that go on all year long. And those events require additional police presence and police patrol while these events are going on. And typically, when these events are going on, we draw from those other services. We draw administrative officers or detectives, and for that weekend or for that week or for that period of time, those officers are retasked into providing additional coverage for the increase of people and patrons who come into town for those events. As we civilianize those positions, we don't have those officers to draw from anymore. The civilians that are hired can only do the job they were hired for. We can't pull them to go sit on the street and now patrol. We can't do that. So we have to be judicious in what we civilianize and how much we rely on that. And then remember, once it's civilianized, if we lose more officers through attrition and we don't fix that, now where are you going to pull people from? You've exhausted that. That's not a panacea that's going to fix everything. You can do it a little bit here and there, and that would bring some relief, and it might even work with a stable environment, but this isn't a stable environment. We're losing officers still. So until you get a handle on the attrition and you stop the exodus of officers to other departments and out of policing altogether, civilianizing will only work briefly because there's only a limited number of positions you can civilianize, and then what? You know, if we take a bureau or we take a service and we staff it with 15 civilians and we save 15 officers, and in 30 days those officers are gone, now what do you civilianize?
When there's so much fear, politicians capitalize on that fear. And solutions to fear, to the fear problem, are usually pretty blunt and fairly primitive responses. Let's go get them. Let's get them down. You're very fearful of crime. I got to go get these people. This is the nation right now is not in any mood for what some sort of pejoratively call hug a thug. Now is not the time. We need to put this fire out And we need to put it out now. We need a big hose. We need to put the fire out now. I don't want to hear about fire prevention. We need to put the fire out now. And I need solutions that appeal to my fear. And that's what's happening right now. And it's counterproductive.
So just explain to me a little bit about why that response, which, as you say, can be kind of easily understood as a political message. Homicides are up. Let's arrest more people. Let's put more people in prison for longer. Let's ramp up sentencing. That is an appealing, simple story. So just kind of explain to me why that's the wrong thing.
Well, it's the wrong thing to do right now. It's expensive to put people in jail. Not all offenders that go to jail, that are in jail, are high risk. When they get out, because they've been institutionalized, it actually increases their chances of committing future crime. And if it worked, if incarceration and mass incarceration actually worked, Louisiana wouldn't have the highest crime rate in the country. We should have the lowest crime rate in the country because our incarceration rates are incredibly, incredibly high. They're the highest not only in the United States, they're the highest in the world. So if incarceration and mass incarceration was the model by which to reduce crime, we should have the lowest crime rate, but we have the highest. So it just doesn't work. That's the evidence. And what we need now, we have the technology to use evidence-based practices to not only bring crime down, but to save the taxpayer money and to redeem lives. And that's what we've been doing in Louisiana, and it has been working.
This idea of trying to prevent homicides rather than throwing more resources at those which have already occurred is one that has long been supported by community groups across the city. At Anna's place in the Tremaine neighbourhood, they have a stark reminder of what could befall the children they help without their intervention.
It started years ago. Father actually used to do, and his wife used to bring flowers to the mayor's office just to kind of let them know, hey, we lost someone and here's the flowers for that individual. And so now this is a visual of each person that has been murdered in the city. It's an eye-opener. You're able to see this is serious, this is for real, but it also serves as a memorial for those loved ones that were lost. Because they were a brother, a sister, an uncle, and an aunt, a mom and dad, and they deserve to be heard and be seen from their loved one. We have people that call and say, hey, I don't recall my son or daughter or whomever's name being on there, and so once a month those names go on that list. And so outside of the board that we currently have, to the far right, there is a continuation of names that are being added on a month basis.
And just tell me, you were saying that your sister's name is on that board as well?
Yes. Back in 2016, September 13th, so yesterday was the 6-year anniversary, her husband murdered her in their home. And so it's something my family have dealt with for the last 6 years. Very tough, very emotional. I haven't built up to go out and see it as much. I do want to be able to go and not get emotional, but it is something that I definitely understand when people are here and they see it. She was a best friend. She's my kid's godmother. She's number 3 out of the 8 of us, and so it's very near and dear to me, so I get emotional about it.
And I guess that gives you a very strong connection to the sort of problems that the city is facing in terms of the homicide rate?
Most definitely. Being away from here, I left at the age of 17 and I returned at the age of 41. And so it's near and dear to my heart to make sure that we are doing everything possible to save our youth. We can't afford to lose anyone else, and we continue to do it on a day-to-day basis. But Anna's Place is going to continue to fight to make sure that it's not happening to our youth.
Okay, so I can see you use this room for art. You've got paint up on the walls?
Yes, lots of paint all over the walls. We just transitioned from our summer program to our fall program, and so we had a lot of their pictures along the way. But if you look up, you'll see our rainbow of colors and just all of the art that takes place in here. Over the summer, we also had a storytelling. One of the deacons from the church would come in and tell stories about African-American history, about the Treme area, and different things to kind of get our kids up and moving first thing in the morning. And so we use it for art, we use it for storytelling, and any other subject area that we need to get kids going, to find programming.
And what sort of ages are the children that you help here?
The kids here are K through 12. Used to stop at 17, but now we're moving more to 24. Our first cohort of students just finished up their freshman year of college. What we've noticed is there's still some things that they need assistance with. And so we're going to expand that to 24 now, just until they're right out of college and moving into their careers. We are trying to interrupt the cycles of poverty and violence. We have a lot of kids that lived in this area for a very long time. And so now the area gentrification is taking place in the area. And so now our kids are moving into a variety of areas within the metropolitan area. And so since that, we've had to hire transportation to be able to pick these kids up, bring them back to the community that they were raised in, and be able to receive the things that they, quite honestly, probably never would have received if the program didn't exist. We offer our kids a hot meal. And I bring that up only because we have some students that this is probably the only hot meal that they get. We were able to raise funds to get a chef to come in and cook a hot meal for our kids. And so it's very important to us to make sure that our kids are receiving everything that they possibly can to be successful.
And one of the things that some people say to us is that they feel as though it's the younger people that are driving a lot of this crime, that are driving a lot of the violence in the city, and they feel as though, the only way to deal with that is harsher and harsher punishments for those people. And I wonder if you can explain to me the difference in the approach that you take here in trying to stem the same problem.
The approach we take here is we're giving them an opportunity and a chance to be successful. We're teaching them the things that they need to learn, the soft skills that they would need when they're interviewing for a job. Just the simple fact of eye-to-eye contact, firm handshakes, being polite, being respectful to their peers and to strangers. And so we're taking an approach to help educate them, and we're not looking past the traumas that happened to them previously. And so a lot of our 17, 18, 19-year-olds now, if you think back, Hurricane Katrina. So that was a lot of things that were overlooked with this group of kids that we need to start focusing on. And so now that we have a younger crew, we're starting at kindergarten, we're making sure that they receive the mental health support as much as possible so they don't end up turning to, so I don't want to say gangs, but rival groups that may not like each other, that may do things to harm each other, or may go out and commit crimes together. We're trying to stop that. Our time frame is 3:30 to about 7 o'clock. With my experience as an educator, what I've realized is those are pivotal times. Most of our kids have parents that work 2 and 3 jobs. And so from 3:30 to 7 o'clock, they can be inside by themselves. And they can have that one friend or neighbor that says, hey, let's go out and do this. But by coming to our program, that time frame is now booked with positivity. It's booked with NASA programs. It's booked with music therapy. It's booked with the Jazz and Heritage Center to learn how to play instruments. It's booked with opportunities for reading and writing enrichment. And so if we can get them in here for that time frame, we're blocking out all of the negativity, and we're creating students that will be able to save their neighbor or save their friend. And we feel like if we continue to do that, it'll only increase in numbers, and we have less kids that are committing these crimes.